State Hillary Clinton has announced that she'll consider a request by 4 US senators to examine the links between the oil company BP and the Libyan government. The senators have demanded an investigation into whether BP lobbied the British government to secure the transfer of the Lockerbie bomber to Libya in the hope of securing an offshore oil drilling deal. Abdel Baset al-Megrahi was released from Greenock Prison by the Scottish Justice Secretary Kenny McCaskill last August. Here's Glenn Campbell.
Dying from cancer. The only man convicted of the Lockerbie bombing boards a plane for Libya last summer. He was allowed home to die on compassionate grounds. But could a major oil contract have influenced the decision to let him go? Is it possible he was traded to preserve BP's exploration interests off the Libyan coast? 4 US senators suspect that is the case and are demanding a formal inquiry.
The bottom line is simple. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it just might be a corrupt deal between BP, the British government, and Libya.
If BP is found to have gained access to Libyan oil reserves by using a mass murderer as a bargaining chip, then make no mistake, any money it makes off of that oil is blood money, pure and simple.
BP's standing in America is already rock bottom following the Gulf of Mexico disaster. But what's the basis for linking the oil giant to the release of a convicted terrorist? In May 2007, Tony Blair struck a deal in the Libyan desert with Colonel Gaddafi, which promised, among other things, a prisoner transfer agreement between the two countries. That same day, Mr. Blair, supervised as BP's boss, Tony Hayward, signed a $900 million contract to drill for oil and gas off the Libyan coast. There followed a flurry of letters between the Scottish and UK governments. Ministers in Edinburgh wanted Megrahi, perhaps the only Libyan in a British jail at that time, excluded from the prisoner transfer deal. BP was impatient for progress, and have confirmed to Newsnight they pressed the then Foreign Secretary Jack Straw to move quickly to conclude the agreement. But a couple of days before the 19th anniversary of the Lockerbie bombing, Mr. Straw wrote to the Scottish Justice Secretary saying, "I've not been able to secure an explicit exclusion." He cited wider negotiations with Libya and the overwhelming interests of the United Kingdom. A few days later, BP's deal to drill off the Libyan coast was formally ratified. The prisoner transfer agreement was later signed, and in 2009, Libya applied for Megrahi to come home. A second application for release on compassionate grounds was also lodged after Megrahi was diagnosed with cancer. It was this request that was granted. And while this former British ambassador to Libya doesn't think commercial pressure swayed the decision, he says refusal could have harmed British business.
It was well known in the British business community, and I believe to the British government, that Libya would take a very severe view if Mr. Megrahi died in a Scottish prison.
What would the consequences have been had that been the outcome?
I don't know, but going from what happened to other countries, some contracts could well have been lost.
Tonight BP said they'd pressed for a prisoner transfer agreement because we were aware that a delay might have negative consequences for UK commercial interests, including ratification of BP's exploration agreement. However, they say, we did not express a view about the specific form of the agreement, which was a matter for the UK and Libyan governments, or make representations over the al-Megrahi case, which was solely a matter for the Scottish executive and not for the UK government. Megrahi flew home to a hero's welcome. He's outlived his 3-month prognosis by almost 8 months. And in America, Hillary Clinton is under pressure to intervene.
I've received the letter. We will obviously look into it.
The State Department's still mulling over those calls for it to investigate possible links with BP. And it's considering separate calls from senators for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to pick up the phone to the Foreign Office here in London and demand Megrahi's immediate recall to prison.
The Foreign Office says there's no mechanism for doing that when someone's been released on compassionate grounds. The Scottish Justice Secretary stands by that decision to let Megrahi home to die. Newsnight understands his condition is deteriorating. As one source put it, a heavy cold could put him under. But Megrahi has already proved remarkably resilient.
Tomorrow.
Discuss with me, Peter Dow, and other viewers of this video by registering your own username account with the For Freedom forums.